You're listening to the Zen Cop Podcast.
Guys, welcome back to the Zen Cop Podcast. I am your host, Mac Rollins. This is Season 3, Episode 3. Pumped to have Ghost from Llorona Customs on the show today. We're going to have a lot to talk about, a bunch of gear stuff, fun stuff. Blade is coming up in Atlanta, a fun part of that. If you guys do bump into Ghost, you will get a free, pretty cool bracelet. He does a lot of custom jewelry, some really neat stuff. So mention this podcast to him and you will get a free bracelet if you're at Blade coming up in a few days, actually. So that'll be a lot of fun. Anyway, looking forward to this episode. It was fun connecting with him. He's done a variety of collaborations with a bunch of makers. This is definitely going to be more of a gear episode. So I know it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. We're going to try to not use too many acronyms or words that are unfamiliar. It's, as you'll find out, it's a very interesting subculture and something that I always have found fascinating and really enjoy meeting makers. Being one myself, it's just neat to see creativity, how they started, and where it's going. So without further ado, we'll dive into it. Ghost, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
So I'm the Crimson Ghost. I'm the owner of Llorona Customs, and what I do is I make very, very odd escape and evasion tools / garrots that are hidden as necklaces. Also restraint tools disguised as bracelets. I do a lot of really weird stuff, and I've been doing it for a while now. I've been a part of the community, so it's interesting to see how everything has evolved over the past few years, because this is my first time like participating in the community in a while. And so now that things are much different than they were, it's really cool to see platforms like this, you know.
Nice. Yeah. There's it's an interesting like subculture, and I think it's if more people knew kind of how deep it went, it would make more sense. But in terms of like, I guess you would say kind of just the EDC, which for the audience who doesn't know, everyday carry, there's just kind of a bunch of subcultures that go beneath that, and it goes into the knife community, the personal defense community, the firearms community, and there's all these different kind of rabbit holes that go underneath, and then some that go even further and further. But for what you do, can you tell us a little bit more about specifically like the stuff that you make and
Yes,
some of the words that you use? I don't think anyone really might not even know what it is.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially what I make is I make jewelry that's disguised as a tool,
Cool.
actually. And so essentially, like, it started off, I'll give you guys the whole story. So one of my friends, quite a while ago, talking about the depth of this community, his name was Adam, and he went by the Sleep of Reason 88. He started making these way long, I want to say like almost 10 years ago now. It might have been as early as 2015. And him and I were really close. He took a bunch of orders from people, and he was supposed to come down to my wedding and a bunch of other things. And then one day he just vanished, just straight up fell off the face of the earth. And when he did that, he took what these are kind of with him. And so I brought them back, covered a bunch of his old orders, got people the stuff that they ordered from him and made sure that everything was square. And then we kind of just went from there. But what these are is what I tell people is they're actually kind of they're closer to something called an alike, which I'm probably murdering the pronunciation of that. But essentially, they are disguised as, of course, there would be a train.
It's fine.
Like right now. But every time I go to start talking again, he's like real happy with that horn. All right. Anyway, so what alike are essentially like undercover rosaries, to my understanding. They're different in form and function and factor. And so essentially what these are is, if you've ever heard of like The Godfather, or this is for people that I assume don't know. A garrote, you can pull it over somebody's head and use it to choke them to unconsciousness or further. And that's essentially what these are. But if you are wearing one with our Santa Muerte pendant, um, you can say it's a religious artifact, and nobody's gonna try to take your religious piece of wear. And then also, they can be used to cut out of restraints. Something I made sure of when we blended our proprietary cord, and when I was talking to like kind of cordage manufacturers, I was like, hey, it's got to be abrasive. Not so abrasive that when you're wearing it, it cuts you or messes you up or gives you, a rash or whatever, but it needs to be abrasive enough to cut through, plastic restraints or things like that. And then it also needs to be strong enough that if somebody needs to be restrained with it, they can be restrained. And so originally the idea for the cordage was ultralight backpacking tents.
Okay.
And that's what I was going to use it for. And then, Billy Trident actually was like, dude, you know how to make these things. You should just come back and make these. You should just do it. And so I finally decided one day that I was going to do exactly that. I found the Japanese supplier that we have now for our beads. His family's been doing it for over 200 years. And, essentially just started research. A lot of the links and stuff that we use actually come from police reports. Billy Trident told me the place to really look if you're looking for stuff on ligatures and garrotes isn't books or movies or TV. It's police reports, and so I read all of the police reports for Gacy, for BTK, for Kemper, for all of these dudes that use ligatures, and then kind of figured out what lengths work, and also found some old SOE manuals and started reading those and saw what links that they suggested, and then kind of came up with our platform based off of that. It's very dark and morbid, but that's the reality. Like you said, there's some stuff that goes way deeper in this community, but if you want stuff that works, that's where you look.
Yeah. I've seen a couple of your, I think they were necklaces at a few trainings I've been to. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, they're really cool. That you wouldn't know what you were looking at. And even the material itself, it's soft in the hand, but it can easily, if you were to wrench your own finger with it, probably cut pretty good and wouldn't feel too great.
It burns you too. There's been so many times where I do all of these by hand. So that's the other thing. We're super slow. I always tell people, hey, we're slow but honest. That's the one thing that we're built upon here. But the reason that we're so slow is because each bead, we take a pair of calipers and a few other tools like a micrometer, and we measure the bead's surface, the inside hole, a bunch of other things. And we've basically built a tolerance of what we want our beads to look like. And so if you look at our necklaces, you'll notice that a majority of the beads, some of them will be a little different, but not by much. The variation all comes from me messing up, but also it'll burn you. That cord, I was holding some of the cord one day and my puppy came running by and she grabbed some in her mouth and ripped it out of my hand. And dude, I had a rope burn like you would not
Hmm.
believe.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the product and stuff that comes out. Unless you make something yourself. Like I have a lot of friends that, knife guys, and then there's like obsessive knife guys, and then there's guys who really like knives. And Um, I got into the knife game about 10 years ago. It didn't last very long. It was just too much. It was a lot of work and it was a lot of time and it was a fun experience. But when you put all that effort into it and the price of some knives, like I have friends who would never, ever even consider spending, the money that some guys do on some of their equipment. But the process in which it's made, if you really understood it, right, like from
Yeah.
a maker perspective, especially if it's just you. I mean, I can relate with the holsters and the Scorpion King stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's a one-man operation, and if you start to expand or you try to make it faster or bigger, you kind of lose the quality. So I always tell people that if you're buying from especially a one-man show or one-person show, it's you're getting a quality product. It's not going to be the fastest shipping. It's not going to be the fastest turnaround, but worth the wait and worth the money. And I'm big on the cry once theory, and that goes for
Yep.
anything. I mean, especially with guns, knives, whatever. You can buy the same thing 5 or 6 times or you can buy one and it'll last a lifetime. And even with the one purchase, you usually get better customer service, you get a better warranty. That's just
Oh
been my
yeah.
personal experience overall with anything involving equipment. But going back to your intro and stuff, tell me a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up, and how you kind of
Yeah.
came to get into this field.
So, my dad was born in 1945. He's actually my grandfather. My grandparents adopted me when I was about 3.5 months old. But dad was a Vietnam Mac V, and he basically was the wayward home for children. So my family, what we on my mom's side, they kind of have this history of just like, I guess we're like the Spartan family. Like, oh, you're 6 now. Fuck you. Get out of my house. Like, And so, like, my parents would go to, like, my cousins, because my cousins would pick up the phone and call and be like, hey, mom's been out gambling for 3 days with a new country music singer she met at the bar. And we're out of food. And so dad just got tired of it and, brought us all there to his place. And so growing up, it was kind of like Lord of the Flies because he really didn't coddle us. He's Lebanese and we lived in Texas. And so if we fucked up and we were yelling at each other or whatever, he would just throw boxing gloves in the middle of the floor and he'd be like, if it's not worth fighting over physically, then it's not worth talking about. And frankly, I'm tired of hearing both of you bitch. So either fight or shut the fuck up. One of the two. And actually, I think we only boxed like once or twice before we realized what he was trying to tell us.
Yeah.
uh,
What part of Texas did you grow up in?
so I grew up in North Texas in DFW.
Okay.
Although my parents moved to California with me for a period of time, we lived on the Avenue of the Giants, and that's honestly kind of where like the knife thing started. Was because there was this weird shop on the Avenue of the Giants. It was like this gift shop where you would go into this big hollow tree or whatever. And in there was an older dude that was like really into Soldier of Fortune, like the classic Dale Gribble. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think these dudes exist past 1997,
Yeah.
kind of a deal. But he was like, dude, you know, you're out in the woods all the time running around with your friends here. And he gave me like one of those Rambo knives. You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is fucking cool. I'm the coolest motherfucker there ever was. And then, of course, a week later, we broke the blade trying to, like, tie it to a stick or something to use it as a spear. But that's, like, kind of where the knife addiction started. And then we moved back. Um, and kind of the teenage years is where I really started to get into this. So I met some people that were really into making knives. I want to say around 2012. And just like you said, dude, there's some knives out there that are thousands of dollars. But if you
Mm-hmm.
spend money on good gear, you know. So for my graduation present, I graduated in 2012. The only thing I wanted was a Benchmade Infidel
Okay.
auto.
Yeah. The auto. Yeah.
And dad was like, dude, that's a $400 knife. Are you high on crack? That's like a car payment. And I was like, no, I really want this knife. So dad got it for me. And, I started posting pictures on the internet and then met a bunch of other weirdos that also like posting pictures of their stuff on the internet. And, we kind of just started talking. And then I met Billy, and Billy has been such a giant resource. If you haven't ever talked to Billy Trident, dude, you need to try to get him on here. That's
We've spoken online. I sent him some stuff for the auctions. We've never done a formal introduction though. We've only spoken on Instagram. But he's a really good dude. I enjoy his he's a wealth of knowledge. And man, I could listen to him for hours with all of the weaponry stuff and just the amount of things that he has on hand just to talk about is pretty wild.
You'll say something like, I'll talk about something that's in a movie or whatever, and he'll be like, hang on, and he'll go like grab
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, here I got it right here. Yeah.
Yeah, from his collection.
And he's a
And I
really
mean,
interesting maker too. I love his brass. I love all of the stuff he does.
dude,
It's wild.
there is not a better pair of knuckles, which honestly, in my opinion, I got a pair of Mafia Pros from him. I also got a Scorpion King from you, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I love
Cool.
that.
Thank you.
I'm super jealous of Ed's red and black.
Yeah, the Black Widows, it's kind of been getting around. It was posted a couple of days ago, but just so everyone knows, those are going to be in person only. So the only way to get one is to see me in real life, and that's the only way. And that's the way they're going to
Ah,
be forever. So we have plans to go to Blade in Utah, so that's probably going to be our first public appearance. So we'll see how
well,
it goes.
I
But
I guess I'm gonna hustle my way down to Blade, Utah, because as a little hardcore kid, that reminds me exactly of the Fugazi square dancing vinyl that was black and red.
yeah.
And so when I saw it, I was like, "Fuck, dude, that's cool as shit." Anyway,
The out the front, you were talking about
yeah.
OTFs for a second. Yeah.
Yeah, so OTFs, and so I got into OTFs and really just started to like show up in the general community, and that's how I met Billy Trident. Was he had a crazy shark OTF, which it was like from this company that was long defunct. They made them by hand. You could only get them, X amount of years, and of course I fell in love with one that I would never be able to find because they don't
Yeah.
exist anymore. And he just kind of started talking to me and introduced me to other people. And really, I think that's kind of how the community works is you meet another person online and you're like, oh, this dude's just as cool as I am. Like he's into the same stuff. And then he introduces you to a bunch of other goblins,
Mm-hmm.
which I really do think to some extent part of the EDC thing. I know with me specifically is I'm like a little fucking treasure goblin, dude. I want all the shit. So when I lay it out and I take photos of it, it looks cool as fuck. you know, and it kind of makes things, a little more interesting in the day to day. But I met Billy, and once he introduced me to some of those folks, it kind of just rolled from there. And then I started going to classes and started listening to older people talk that were much older and wiser than me, and started to pick up a lot of the older arts. So, Dad, growing up, carried a blackjack everywhere,
Okay. Yeah.
um, and very
Can
quickly
you talk
taught me.
about blackjacks real quick? Because we're going to use a lot of like acronyms or words that people are going to
Oh,
go, what the hell is that? So what's a blackjack?
yes. So blackjack is a coil spring. Sometimes I've heard they were aircraft springs or basically any type of long, skinny coil spring with a weight on the end, normally shaped like a fishing sinker of some kind or rounded, wrapped in leather, with a long, long, long lanyard strap on the end to use. To wrap around your hand. You can also deploy it that way from that strap using your thumb.
And that's
Um,
kind of like a for people who might know what a blackjack is. It's kind of similar, but not different body structure, different same concept. Impact weapon, I guess, is what we would
yes,
call it.
it's kind of like the way I try to explain it to people is it's a pocket billy club.
Yeah. Okay.
Like if you were going to try and like, it's basically, in my opinion, a better version of the expandable baton that you can put in your pocket, because the expandable baton, you hit people with it, sometimes it collapses. You go, oh no, you got to redeploy,
Mm-hmm.
and then that gives them time to create distance either away from you or towards you. And that's never good. Although we would prefer away, right? Um, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to stuff like that. But Dad taught me how to use them to great effectiveness. I was a short and fat kid growing up, and I got beat up a lot, specifically by my cousins who had basically become my brothers, or kids at school, And I was also really into martial arts movies, and during this time in like the 90s and 2000s, everything was solved by the power of friendship, versus like the 80s karate movies where it was like, you insulted my dog once, I will have your skull.
Okay.
You, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like those vending, it's kind of like the John Wick return to form on that didn't really happen until much later. And so, I was like, if I'm just really nice to these kids, they won't do anything. And then one day they put some quarters in a sock and came up behind me and knocked me unconscious at school and thought it was funny, and everybody was laughing and stuff. And so Dad comes up to the school and he's like, listen, buddy, you're fat. I hate to break it to you. You either got to get really strong or you got to start using weapons. So he had this Buckheimer 7982, which is a very small blackjack, just over 6 inches in length. Said, listen, the next time you see that kid, I'll wait out here in the parking lot because I'm going to have to come get you. You walk in there and you smack him right on the outside of his elbow with this. And you tell him that if he ever messes with you again, you're going to smack him in the face. And so I did exactly that. And after that, Dad started teaching us more self-defense stuff. And one of the things that he always told me with the jacks was avoid the head, seek bone. Because a lot of these people think that if you just swing for the fences with one of these jacks and hit somebody in the head, that there's not going to be any real world consequence for that. And the
Oh yeah.
reality is that's a bludgeoning tool. And a majority of people that are killed in confrontation are killed from blunt force trauma.
Yeah.
They're not killed from knives or whatever. I mean, you can fall on the concrete and hit your head the wrong way and die, And so I
Absolutely.
always tell people, if you're going to carry one of these things, you need to know where your targets are. Kneecaps, wrists, collarbones, shoulder blades,
Yeah.
elbows, places
Meaty portions of the body too. Yeah.
yeah, because if you strike somebody in the head, and I think that that's another weird thing that's kind of happened in our community is the tools have come back. Like these older tools like blackjacks and stuff like that. The tools have come back, but none of the training has. And so
Yeah.
there's people that are making these tools, and don't know what they're making or why they're making it. They're just doing it to do it. And then they put it in the hands of people that also don't know what's going on. And then they whack somebody in the head and tools get banned again.
Yeah. California, in particular, almost a year ago, they legalized essentially SAPs, or legal blunt force. Is blunt force defense tool is now something you can carry. I don't know the exact. Read it up on, or read up on it on your own. But
Yeah,
for people listening, it's follow your local state regulations. But seeing that come back was interesting because I didn't know there was a driving force behind that effort. I was personally think it's ridiculous that there's certain restrictions on things that
agreed.
should be completely legal. But it was neat to see that come back as an option. I mean, especially with the
Oh, yeah.
increase in criminal activity, and you bring up training, which is a huge part of that. If you can, I mean, lots of people go out and they buy all this stuff, but if you're not using it, or at least at minimum training with it to a degree of failure or fatigue, and just ensuring that you know what you're doing with it, and you can buy all the stuff you want, but it's not going to be useful unless you know exactly what you're doing with it.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like I never understood the dude that'll spend thousands of dollars on guns, right? He'll buy the like most Gucci ass fucking shit on the planet, but then he won't spend $200 for a fucking class to learn how to run that system,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what it is. And it's like, then why'd you buy it?
And even I would even echo that if you live anywhere near National Forest or BLM, the training's free. It's really going to cost you ammo and gas. So even if it's
Exactly.
going out by yourself, it's at minimum. I compare it to driving a car. You can buy the car, but if it just sits in the driveway, it just atrophies, and so do you. So you got to get in the driver's seat, drive around, see how it works, and make sure it's something you're comfortable with. Because
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of times, with anything with impact weapons, a big part of that is the proximity. So if we
Yes.
looked at things that were, distance, that were going to provide us distance, if we were to use, a gun or some other type of projectile, right, versus a sap, blackjack, or anything that's going to require close contact, you're exposing yourself to a lot more. So I always tell people, if you're in a scenario where you can get out of it, run. That's the
Oh
safest thing
yeah.
you can do. You have a cell phone in your pocket, you should use it, call 911, get away. But if you're in a scenario that involves a very close encounter, you should at minimum know how to defend yourself with the weapon of your choice. And it does make people feel better to have something with them. um, but again, it's only going to be as useful as you make it.
Now I will say jacks are very suggestive looking. And so if
Oh,
you're
for
like a
sure. Yeah.
if you're like a 12-year-old boy like I am, the first time you hold one in your hand and it flops over to the side, you're like, ha ha ha, ha,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a funny thing. But the upside of that is they're mostly forgotten. So
Yeah.
I work security. That's what I do now, private security and regular security for an amusement park when I'm not doing this. And when I was working, some private clubs, I won't say their names because they asked me very nicely not to blow up the spot, so I'm not going to do that. But we were essentially told, "Hey, look, if you can get close enough to somebody to see the whites of their eyes, make sure you're using a jack or a sap." because if they have a knife or something, you want to have as much reach as possible. And you can have so much reach with a jack that people don't really understand what they are either. So like I flipped out a jack on somebody one night and was like, all right, like, you know, if you don't calm down, you don't stop breaking shit. Like he ripped the sink out of the wall in the men's bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Like the porcelain sink, just drunk as shit, fell over, ripped the sink out of the bathroom, knocked over one of the stalls, big boy too. And he turned around and, why you got a dildo in your hand? And I was like, oh shit, god damn it. All right. And then I realized he was just fucked up and stupid and not violent, and we got him out. But
That
a
might
lot
have
of people,
scared him.
yeah, well, hey man, you know, I'm already a kind of creepy looking dude. Like I wear a really funny hat that's turned up a funny way, and you know I have a big beard and a bunch of tattoos. Which, when by the way, when I saw how many tattoos you had, you posted a photo the other day. I was like, holy shit!
Oh yeah, I got a couple.
I'm like, Max got some serious. I got 3 little shitty ones.
I have too many.
Well, you know, you do run out of space eventually,
Yeah,
but I don't think that'll be a problem for you because then you can just color over, right?
yeah. If I get yeah, it's an expensive hobby or habit, I guess. But
Dude, I never understood it until I got my first one. And then after that, my wife has 13 tattoos. And so when I got my first one, I got it with her. And I was like, I'm so brave. I got this little tattoo on my leg for Friday the 13th. Look at me. You know, I'm going to go get a bunch more. And then the first time I had to sit down for more than an hour, I was like, oh, this is truly not all funs and games, puppies
oh
and
yeah,
unicorns.
it sucks. I've
At about,
never I've never had an enjoyable tattoo experience. It's always painful. So
you know what? Come to think about it, me too. And everybody that's like, it doesn't hurt, you are a fucking liar. That shit
it
hurts.
it hurts. I don't understand the weirdos that fall asleep or just kind of just I don't know. It's to each their own. My wife actually, she's heavily tattooed and she barely has a reaction, but yeah, I don't enjoy it. It's not a fun thing. And every time I'm halfway through it, I just kind of go, this was a stupid idea. So,
Dude, I felt the same way, and like, dude, getting back to jacks or and saps, like, it's kind of that same thing as like pain compliance, right?
mm-hmm.
Right, that's all you're trying to do with those weapons is gain pain compliance, and I think a lot of people misunderstand the continuum of which force should be used upon, you know? And so like if I look at you and you're 6'8", like 400 pounds, I'm not gonna fight you with my fucking fist. Like it's not gonna happen. You are obviously bigger than me, and the only fight that I lose is a fair one. So fuck it, right? Fight dirty. I never understood that either. A bunch of my friends, you know, even some of the people I work with in the security industry, they're like, "You carry all that shit. Why aren't you just gonna put your hands up and fight someone?" I'm like, first of all, crackheads are disgusting. You ever tried to touch one of those motherfuckers? You ever had to throw
Mm-hmm.
one to the ground? They're greasy and shit. Like
Yeah,
I'm not trying to fuck with that. Secondly, I don't want to have to get that close.
yeah,
And it just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand the whole, you know, fight fair thing. It's no. If you're dumb enough to pick a fight with the dude in the pink hat and the Hello Kitty Crocs on the street, like we're not like we've gotten past, you know, what is allowable, I assume.
yeah. And I always tell people that the most valuable tool we carry is our mouth, and that's going to walk you into or out of pretty much any scenario. It's
Oh yeah.
um, yeah. There's a big ego check out there when I think people realize that there's I don't know when things get really bad or really violent, it usually ends poorly for both sides. As with my job, I can say for certain that if you're gonna carry any type of weapon and all that stuff, what you can do to protect yourself is to be able to articulate exactly why it happened and when to stop and when to walk away. And yeah, there's it's unfortunate. I mean, in California especially, the civil liability aspect is big. So I always remind people that, even if it's in self-defense, there's always going to be something that needs to be explained or talked about or especially in a court. And you might even be judged by 12 people that you don't know.
Yeah.
So
That have never
you gotta
met
be
you.
aware of all that. Yeah. But for the jacks, because I meant to ask this earlier, and I don't know the internal components. Does the spring, does that allow for like the mobility aspect? Is that what that does?
Yes. So essentially, the way that I describe it is anybody that's ever held a whip, like a real whip, which I'm country as fuck, obviously. So if you ever had a bull whip, you know how the handle isn't solid.
I
It's
actually
kind of
never
like a
held a real whip before.
oh
No.
shit. Okay, so basically, the handle is also a very thick coil spring, and so
Oh wow.
when you when you generate force, right, you're coming from the hip. I'm showing for those of you
Yeah.
who can't see me. I'm showing the motion, but coming up from the hip, you stop and kind of like snap your wrist, and it generates like, dude, I have seen being a bouncer and my parents owned bars my whole life. I one time saw an older dude get into a confrontation with a younger man, and the younger man pulled a knife out, and the older dude put a fucking canoe in his head with a jack, and it was one quick just snap of the wrist, bop, and the dude was out like a pound of wet newspaper on the ground.
Hmm.
I mean, he ended up living, but I think he lost some control of his face and stuff afterwards,
Yeah.
like never really the same after that. And so that's the thing, is like these weapons in the wrong hands with the no training are lethal,
Yeah.
are incredibly lethal. If you just go and swing for somebody's head and you at all stop. Now they were invented to be a nicer, kinder baton, so the idea was is that you would choke up on it, and then when you hit somebody it would roll, right? And
Okay.
so it would reduce the felt force of the impact. They were initially called softeners. Well, then some jackass, you know, decided one day, well, what the fuck happens if I swing it like a baseball bat and I put my hip into it and I don't stop and I follow through? The answer to that is you generate an extreme amount of force. Like
Yeah.
I even a 6-inch jack that's 6 inches overall will snap your arm if it hits you right.
Because I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you know either. But what is there like a? I mean, we could probably debate this, but what are the origins of like how did this get created and what was it through a certain war or conflict or just
So
a place in the world?
you want my opinion on how it
Yeah.
was
Sure.
started?
Yeah.
My opinion on how it was started was sailors.
Okay.
I think it probably actually started with like the boatswain's cosh, which is kind of like it was a thing made out of whale dick. Like literally, it had the penis of a whalebone, and the reason that they used that was because it was flexible,
Okay.
right?
Like a cartilage almost.
Like a cartilage, yeah. And so they use that flexible material and put, a heavy monkey's fist on the
Yeah.
end of it and essentially made kind of like a mace. Well,
Okay.
then I think those guys went around a little bit and we're like, well, that's really big and we want to go drink at the bar. And, concealment has always been a thing since the days of yore. I'm sure that since we were fucking primates, banging rocks together, we were figuring out how to conceal weapons.
Yeah.
That's just our nature. And so I think that they thought a little bit more on it and were like, how do I conceal this? And so then they probably made the slung shot, which for those of you the uninitiated, that's kind of a stopgap in between a blackjack and a sap. It's normally made of a flexible body, so instead of a spring, this will just be a leather strap with a head on the end of it. They're often called hobo jacks. And so I think that a monkey's fist with a solid wrist loop was probably the next step. And then I think at some point, probably once, guns became meh kind of reliable, they were like, well, we need something that'll generate even more force in a smaller package that also won't degrade over time. Because I imagine that the rope variants and the whalebone variants degraded rather quickly, and they're probably constantly having to remake them. So I think that this was likely a step in longevity, but also power.
Hmm.
And then I think that they kind of, it might have even gone further back than that. It could have gone back to the frontier days or, whatever, because there's sand clubs that I've seen that are extremely similar to what I would consider a blackjack. It's like a
Yeah.
potato shaped club filled with sand that they made, and the idea is the same, you
Yeah.
know?
I think the concept has been in existence, like you said, for hundreds of thousands of years potentially, just
Oh,
to
yeah.
compensate and then conflict and then I mean more recently I think we saw a lot of really interesting stuff come out of World War I with just
Yes.
improvised stuff and even before that. But I think every time we have to, you know, sustain some level of defense, there's going to be something that's going to be improvised or created, and I think that's been a pretty fairly constant, right? Because
Oh
we can
yeah.
look at the gun and the defense tool that has been, but also I think just the accessory market has been a thing. I mean, and worldwide too. Like some of the stuff out of
Oh yeah.
Paris, there's a whole underground thing that Billy was the one that actually turned me on to that, about all the weird knife stuff and just the subcultures within certain parts of the world where
Oh
weaponry was
yeah.
just such a very interesting thing, and it was almost like it was this cultural thing that was embedded from thousands of years prior. So it's really fascinating.
There's a book that I feel like everybody that's into these tools should read. It's by Harold Jenks. It's called Invisible Weapons of the Modern Day Ninja. And it was written in the 70s or the 80s, and you can tell because it's got a bitchin' ninja on the cover that has huge knockers.
Okay.
But like if you can ignore the big titty ninja on the front cover, once you get in there, there's actually really good information, like how to use an ashtray as a weapon is one of them, and like is some of it hokey 80s like Rex Kwon Do shit? Sure,
Sure. Yeah.
but then there's also some really good shit on knuckles, blackjacks, and stuff in there, which really I asked Billy and prodded him as much as I could, and asked him some information on those Mafia Pro knuckles, because in my opinion, the distinction between the two is it's kind of different than a blackjack. Um,
Not
with
to
a
cut
pair
you
of
off, can you talk about what that is real quick? The Mafia Pro.
Oh yeah, the Mafia Pro. So the Mafia Pro is this knuckle that Trident makes that was based off of a historical design by a working collector, as he put it. Essentially, on the back end of the Mafia Pro, there is an inch thick brace, and it tapers all the way down to 3/16, basically blade edge
Oh, that's really tiny. Yeah.
in the front. And so the idea is like, can you punch with it? Sure, you could throw a punch with it, and the Trident stuff, it's always going to hold up. But mainly where that shines is dusting. Like if I dusted with that knuckle, it would likely take somebody's nose off of their face
Sure.
because of the way. Honestly, I kind of put it into its own category. I don't really think it's necessarily a brass knuckle. I don't think it's necessarily a knife either. It's kind of this very different thing. But all I do know is that Billy told me this: knockers are thick knuckles that are heavy. And that's if you're just trying to get out of a bad situation. You pop the guy once, you're done, you run away. You know, but pros send a message. You know what I mean? Like that's some serious like face irrigation going on. You are going to leave scars. If you punch with them, you're likely going to take the face off of the skull. Um, it's a serious tool, and so I always opt for the blackjack. I have that pair of knuckles, but to be honest with you, I haven't been into a situation where I've felt the need
Yeah.
to because there's a psychological fear factor too, right? Because in the zeitgeist, it's just like everybody kind of knows MMA a little bit now.
Hmm.
Because like back in the 80s it was karate. We had movies like The Warriors and stuff that taught people stuff, and then you would see that stuff happen on the streets, right? You see people messing with the nunchucks and stuff after Bruce Lee did it, things like that. And so nowadays I think MMA is kind of like everybody knows just a little bit of Brazilian jiu-jitsu now, or just a little bit of wrestling or whatever from watching the TV. And so weapons have kind of changed, right? So somebody that maybe in the past didn't know that they could put on a pair of brass knuckles and hit somebody, like you could just throw a regular punch and mess somebody up really bad. Now some of these kids, dude, know how to throw punches from watching YouTube or TikTok influencers.
Hmm.
And if you put a pro or a knocker in the hands of somebody that can actually punch, that's a bad day
Yeah, it could easily kill somebody. Yeah.
if they don't know what they're doing. And so I think if anybody takes anything away from the conversation that we've had today, I think it is that training is worth its weight in gold.
Oh yeah.
Uh, you should train even when you're not training. Have you seen the VR shoot trains stuff?
Like the simulation stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. So I've got a buddy that's like, I've shot 25,000 rounds in VR, and it
Sheesh.
translates over pretty well.
Yeah, it's a little different once you do the real thing, but I mean, It's yeah. I mean, as long as you're doing something, yeah. Even to go back to the brass knuckle thing, if you actually hit someone with brass knuckles, the likelihood of them sustaining a life threatening injury is pretty high. I mean,
Oh yeah.
potentially life changing, and yeah, I mean, anything like that, even if you're carrying them around, again, consult your own state laws. They're legal in a lot of states, but a lot of them still are
A
no. You can have
lot
them
of
as
places they're not.
yeah, you can have them as a novelty, but if you actually struck someone with those, it's a life changing event for the other person, and it's a more than likely a life changing event for the user,
Oh
for
yeah,
sure.
because people don't understand that. Like, one thing I've noticed is everybody is ready to be a cowboy, right? Everybody's ready to throw punches, everybody's ready to fight or whatever. But people often aren't ready for what happens after the violence. And so what I mean by that is some dude runs after you or whatever. He's got a bottle in his hand, so you bash him with a jack. Are you ready for blood to come out of that dude's ears? Are you ready for him to potentially start to seize on the ground? Are you capable of rendering aid in that situation? Because the first thing that I always tell people is if you carry a gun but not a tourniquet, you're an idiot. Straight up.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's one of those things. And so, like, do you know how to help somebody that you've just hit in the head and caused a severe traumatic head injury to? Can you get them stable enough for EMS to take them? Because that could be the difference in your court case.
It could, yeah. There's a lot of moving parts to that, and I always tell people, you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what would an unexperienced, totally removed person think of what just happened. And any type of self defense, regardless of what it is, I mean, the court of public opinion will always supersede anything. And the
Oh
average
yeah.
person, they don't. I mean, I still. It's to the point where it's not even laughable anymore when people say, "Well, why didn't they shoot that person in the leg?" And just the small things that you hear, you'll hear it on the news, you'll hear it, and these are people who are pretty, prominent in local government and in city government. It just blows my mind that some of the suggestions just proved that, I don't want to say that they don't know, is my point.
No, they
And
don't know.
it's
They don't
too much
know.
to understand, and I'm not going to expect someone to understand, but at the same time, that might be a variant of a person who's going to be judging you in a court of law
See,
someday, and that can be very dangerous.
and that's the thing is I absolutely am judging them for not knowing, because if you're going to be judging on this type of stuff, I mean, a jury, it makes a totally different, you know what I mean? But some guy called a shotgun on live television a shart gun,
Hmm.
and I lost it. I couldn't pay attention. Well, why didn't you shoot him in the leg? Oh, I don't know, this thing called the femoral artery.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get shot in the leg at all. I'd prefer not
It-
to get shot, period. But in the leg, that's probably one of the most compromising. I mean, if you anything upper thigh or even in near the pelvic area, there's a lot of major arteries that yeah, it's weird. I don't think most people. It's human anatomy. I'm not going to expect someone to understand that, but
yeah.
it's just the things that could pop up when you're in the hot seat. And I always tell people if it's if the self defense makes sense to the average person, then you're probably going to get sued a little bit less. But in California, you're going to get sued no matter what.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I live in Texas. I just got to drag them onto my property and then we're good.
Texas is a little different. The castle doctrine still exists and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I always tell people just be aware of where you live, because that will hold a tremendous amount of weight when it comes to what you're looking at in a self defense scenario. And you know, training and all that's very important. But I always tell people if you can remove yourself from a situation that's compromising your future and the livelihood of your family, do it. It's not worth it. It's not
Well, that's
worth the
training too, right?
yeah.
That's
But I
training
think
too.
you
That's
I think you have to experience some things to understand just how serious that conversation is. And ultimately, if someone wants to be an idiot, let them walk away and be the bigger person. If the problem persists, do your best to get away, make your family safe. And ultimately, if you're, backed into a corner, literally or figuratively, that's where the decision is made. And that's going to have to be the story you tell, though, in that scenario of, well, I
exactly.
tried to get away. I tried to do this, and it ultimately didn't happen like that.
That's a very important thing too. Is I always tell people that at the end of the day, the best outcome is the other guy goes home and tells his wife, hey, some dude at the bar was a fucking asshole and I was going to beat his ass, buddy, but, he just wouldn't let me have it. And so I walked away. That's the best outcome, is if both people go home unharmed and unchanged. Because even so, my car got broken into right before we moved out to Bumfuckistan. Now I live out in the middle of nowhere. Can't see my house from the road or the air. It's so nice.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, my advice to people is buy land. They're not making any more of it. Um, so if you get an opportunity, anyway, neither here nor there. But we were moving, and I had some stuff in my car, and I drive a sports car. I drive a little Volkswagen GTI. And so some teenagers decided they maybe wanted to take that car, and I caught him. And so, of course, I'm sick right now. I have Crohn's disease. I just got diagnosed, and so like my health has been weird. And so like here I am, covered in sweat, completely like practically naked in my hoochie daddy shorts, no top on, run outside with my fucking Glock, and I index my gun, and I see there's 6 kids standing there, and one of them is standing facing me, kind of at a 45-degree angle. And behind him is a home I know has 3 little girls in it. And he goes to reach for his waistband, and I just hit him with my flashlight, hit him with the strobe and was like, don't do that. Just go, you know, all y'all just run away. I'm just going to close my shit up. I'm going to call the police, but it gives you time to get away. Anytime you spend fucking here with me is time that the cops are already on the way. So just go. So they took off, jumped over the fence. Cops ended up getting them over to Quick Trip a little bit later, but the only reason I didn't squeeze off on him that night was because for whatever reason, I had ball ammo in my mag that night. And, if I had hollow points, maybe a different story. But all I could think about is those little girl's window is right there.
Mm-hmm.
And if I squeeze off on this dude and this round exits him, because it's kind of a hot round, 128 grain, you know, that's not a good day if it enters that room and kills those little girls or injures somebody or worse. And so I think there are situations where even if you think violence is the answer, it likely is not.
Yeah. And I always remind people that we're living in a 4K world where everything is recorded. And even if there's no audio, the visual aspect is very important. You know, what did you do? How did you do it? Did you pursue this individual? Did you have a reason to keep, moving forward when you probably could have gone back inside? There's things that defense attorneys will eat for breakfast. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
in a world where everything is recorded. Literally, I think right now we're at a point in time where, I mean, I could think of every single, I mean, almost every single violent act these days is able to be recorded to some degree. There's something somewhere that's going to capture, whether it's cell phone or it's surveillance
CCTV.
systems, yeah,
Yeah.
which have incredible quality now, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
ability to capture is wild. This the old days of these kind of still frame pixelated images are gone, and your whole life is being recorded in 4K wherever you go. So it is neat because it provides a lot of training opportunities, especially with all and body cam too is another big one that
Oh, yeah.
is pretty wild. But yeah, I always remind people whatever they're going to see is what they're going to see, and how they're going to see it is important. And audio is very important. I always kind of throw that out there for people who do have surveillance and home stuff.
Yes. Audio is
Audio is
important.
huge, and yeah, because it shows context to the scenario. If you have 2 people just standing there and you can't hear what's going on, well then it's your word against theirs. They say, well, I was telling him I was going to cooperate. I was saying that I was trying to leave, and he told me that no, he pulled a gun on me. Versus the audio where it could explain a lot. And yeah, it's a wild world we live in. I really, it's beneficial, but it's also it's just it's weird.
Well, everything is on everywhere now.
Yeah.
Like, dude, used to be when we were kids, you fight some kid in the schoolyard or whatever, like everybody's gonna talk about it for about a month or whatever, and your ego might be sore if you lost. But
Hmm.
nowadays, these fucking kids, world star, they're over here
Yeah.
recording, and then that's like on the internet for life. And I mean, the same thing with robberies and stuff like that. And like you said, it provides really excellent opportunities. But you know what else it makes me not want to do? Go the fuck outside.
Yeah.
Every time I see these videos, I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I'm just gonna stay on my little slice of property. Fuck
Hmm.
everybody else. I'll order everything delivered to my house for the rest of
Yeah.
my fucking life.
And
You know?
it does show society just how, I mean, I would say in terms of just danger and activity, we're at an all-time high for what I think would be some of the more, I guess, egregious violent acts that have happened. We're seeing a lot more kids that
Oh yeah.
are, even stabbings. That we've seen an increase in that with juveniles. It's pretty wild, but I think that, I'm not going to blame the movies or TV. I think it's a social cultural thing to where
I think it is too.
we've allowed that to become so normalized with just everything that now we're seeing a lot more just random acts of violence. Not necessarily, I would say, like in terms of like active shooter stuff, but more so just of like a argument gone completely awry, and then someone dies, and
Yep.
or they're seriously injured over something so stupid. But the human brain of a kid, they're not able to understand the totality of that until
Or
they're much
ramifications.
exactly. So it's something that they do. They think they're cool. They carry a knife, and all of a sudden they stab someone. There was something recently I made that I can't remember what it was, but I can't remember if the kid died or not. But just small things that can happen where, what are we doing? And I think that goes back to a variety of things, including parenting. But
Oh yeah.
there's just an increase in societal disruption overall right now.
Well, there was just a stabbing from some kids over here in Plano, Texas, which isn't that far from me. You know, like two kids got into an argument, one kid stabbed another one, kid fucking died. And it's like, dude, people don't understand. You are like literally a Capri Sun with some bones in it.
Oh yeah,
You, you,
we're
you,
very pliable. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like if somebody nicks you, it's over with. The other thing, you know what I think, something that I've been really grateful to see kind of resurge back into the EDC community is graffiti,
Mm,
which I think has always, in a lot of ways, been a part of the everyday carry culture, even before it was called that.
yeah.
Um, I think graffiti writers, if you don't have a graffiti writer friend, you need to find a friend that writes graffiti because they will teach you all the fucking sneaky shit. Like anything you need to know about getting stuff in or out of places, those motherfuckers can teach you.
Yeah.
Um, like my buddy, he steals markers, and I mean, like I'm like, dude, you literally have a tech job. You could buy the dollar marker. He's like, yeah, but it's not as fun as if I, you know what I mean? It's like, what the fuck? But he used to take a cigarette outside, burn a hole in the top of an empty Route 44 Sonic cup, and then just shove the fucking markers into the Sonic cup and walk out.
Mm,
And he gets to his car, pops the lid off the Sonic cup, and there's 10 or 12 markers ready to go.
interesting.
And I mean, like, also, you know, I think the graffiti scene, now being tied back to EDC, comes a lot with the music too,
Yeah.
because I feel like a lot of us are into that old school hip hop, you know, and a lot of that was tied directly to graffiti. And so now I think it's interesting to see it making a comeback because for years and years and years it wasn't cool, but now you've got like companies like Lucky Street Co. making custom split markers that make different colors when you write on the walls with them and stuff. And like, obviously, I think I have an idea of what you do for work, so you're probably not thrilled that graffiti has come back.
I have an appreciation for art. I personally can't stand it when I travel on Highway 5 and go into a bathroom and there's no mirror because it can't handle the amount of scratching or the gang stuff. I think is ridiculous.
Oh, dumb.
I like street art. There's a city in Miami that was incredible, but it's an interesting dynamic because I mean I don't think it's it, personal property getting vandalized sucks and it's a lot of work to repair it. But I really do like the concept of street art and all the other stuff. And there's a lot of guys who do it. There was a guy who did what was his name? It was a book that was published. He's very, very, very famous. He was on the East Coast. I can't remember his name. Um, it'll come to me. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I live in California, so we have
Oh
the
yeah,
gang,
it's probably a
the
little
gang,
different down there.
the gang billboards. Every time you see a train go by, is pretty interesting. But there's always some interesting art. Like there's I don't know what it was, but a couple of years ago, someone did this on an abandoned building off Broadway. They did this really strange, like Chevy Chase Christmas Vacation mural,
Oh, that
and
sounds fucking awesome.
I took a picture of it. It was so cool, and it only lasted for a couple of days, but the level of detail in it was wild. It was really
See,
interesting.
and like that's the thing for me. I draw little characters and shit that say funny things, but I put them on stickers. Um, and like, dude. A sticker to me is me being, if I'm gonna do graffiti, it's me being kinder, you know? Because like if I write something on your wall, you got to repaint that shit, whatever. But if I leave a sticker somewhere and maybe don't even stick it on the wall,
Yeah.
or drop my sticker somewhere and somebody picks it up and then I'm walking around one day and I see it on a binder or something, that's fine. But I think a lot of graffiti artists have gotten away from like what the rules used to be. Because
Hmm.
tagging somebody's personal property back when I was a kid would get your ass beat. You don't
Yeah.
ever tag personal property. You tag government owned shit only. You know, stuff that isn't going to affect your average man. Like, don't go tag somebody's fence. That's stupid. Oh, dang.
Yeah.
I
The
just
fence
looked up.
stuff happens.
There's a giant Great Pyrenees in my yard. What's up, buddy?
Just
That's so
a
weird.
random dog showed up.
Yeah, literally, I think he lives next door, but he randomly just walked on over here just now. I mean, I got donkeys next door too, and so he's
He
probably their
his
farm
ball went
dog.
over the fence or something.
Yeah, something. Who knows? He's friendly enough though, because I didn't even see him till now, and then I just see this giant white figure. I thought it was a person crawling on all fours for a second. But yeah, I think the graffiti coming back is interesting, and like, dude, another thing, small knives are coming back too, which I
Yeah,
think is
they're
important.
especially fixed. They're coming back really popular again, which is neat.
You mean like you mean like this one? You mean like this one? That's
Oh, the TNC, yeah. I
this
haven't
is my
grabbed one of those
prototype.
yet. Is that
What?
no, I had they dropped that what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, so this is the prototype
Oh
because
wow.
I did a collaboration with them. Here's one of my necklaces that we did a collaboration on. For those of you who can't see, we have a collaboration with Turner CNC and Angler Knives, where essentially what we've gone and done is made the pendant of one of our necklaces the knife itself. And honestly, dude, this is the most underrated knife on the planet. When I looked at it, the first time I ever saw it, I was like, that's really small. And I wear a 2XL glove size.
Okay.
It's literally the size of my thumbnail. You know what I mean? Like, how is it gonna? But
So
dude,
who all collabed on that? So you said you, Turner, and who else?
me, Turner, and Angler Knives. So
Okay.
really, the knife itself is them and Turner, is Angler and Turner. That's their part, but the retention system was something we worked on together. And actually, there was a lot of time that went into that. Like
Is that
getting,
the sheath there?
yep, this is the actual sheath here, and then I run a bead on mine,
Just
just
for a
because
pull.
I have giant,
Yeah.
hands. I mean, but I think what's really interesting about the angler stuff is, first of all, Caleb from Angler Knives is the coolest person on the planet. He's like one of the nicest guys ever. It's been such a pleasure to work with him. But then, secondly, getting like figuring out what loop size
Hmm.
specifically to where they could loop it over and it wouldn't have excess with the knot, but it also would be able to be removed was a
Yeah.
big deal. And then also the general length, because I have a bunch of different lengths that are offered based on those ligature patterns that we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say like the ideal length is a 17.5 inch necklace for the average person. I personally, I'm 6'4". As you can see, I'm almost touching my.
Hmm.
But I'm 6'4", probably 300 pounds, so I wear a 22-inch necklace.
Okay.
But with the anchovy, we went with the standard 17.5, and did stainless steel magnets on it, which are strong enough to where if you pull, this comes out, but the necklace doesn't break apart, which is, I think, the most important thing too, because I can pull this and the necklace will come off, right?
Okay, for
And the
the magnets
magnets,
in the back. Yeah.
but you don't want it to pull off when you're just trying to get to your knife, right?
Yes.
And so I think that kind of going and building this out was a really cool experience, and getting to know how useful little knives are, man. And I mean, look at the LVSC. That's probably one of my favorite knives of all time.
Yeah. It's if you haven't held one, when you actually do, it's kind of neat because it's when I ordered mine, it was a lot smaller than I thought. The C was, but it was so practical. It was an interesting way that it felt so good in the hand. And um yeah, sorry, I'm looking at his stuff right now.
No, yeah, you definitely should. I mean, dude, Caleb
Is
had.
there like a fishing theme? Is that the angler? Is that
Yeah, so he's like mostly an outdoorsman and a fisherman.
Okay.
like bushcraft central. And so like, dude, I've told him many times the defensive applications, but he's really just interested in making good stuff. He's not really, he didn't really care what people do with them afterwards, right? It's more or less like, I'm just going to make a high quality product that's going to work in a multitude of situations.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really admirable. And dude, like personally, he makes the biggest size he makes is called the Dorado. And I have been saving my bead boy pennies so that way I can pick up one of those, because in my opinion it's probably one of the best fixed blade knives on the market right now, other than the Turner Elvia and the Turner Gin. Which, if I could get my hands on a gin, dude, oh my god, you want to talk about knife acquisition syndrome? I sit there and look at pictures of those gins at least once a week.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Bruja. That's one of my favorites.
Dude, I was
Underrated knife.
that knife is really, really fucking cool. And I wish that they still had the red handled versions. So,
Yeah.
I like all my stuff red. But, dude, I think Angler, that's another person you should try and kind of get on here and to talk to as well. Angler is really cool. And I think that if you guys are coming out to Blade Show, I'll be there in literally 4 days now.
Oh, the one in Georgia?
Yeah, at the one in
Nice.
Georgia. So, if anybody listening to this wants to come see me, I'll be at the Angler Knives booth talking. I'll be hard to miss. I'm kind of funny looking. Mac will tell you. You know?
Well, that's cool. If
But
people want to get a hold of you for stuff, I know we talked about orders and time and
yeah,
process, but if they want to collaborate or if they want to buy some of your stuff, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
the best way to get a hold of me is through DM or our shop phone. So, one thing I had to do very quickly with the amount of orders that were coming in, which I'm so thankful that we have so many people that love and support us, and that's so awesome. It's actually kind of humbling. I'm sure you feel the same way. You put something out there and you don't know how people are going to
Oh,
react to
yeah.
it, and then they support it, and it's like, dude, like the Scorpion King, that is the coolest. Which, if you don't have a Scorpion King yet, you absolutely need one. But
Thank you.
dude, well, it's just such a, like, I threw it in my bag and went to one of the most secure places in Texas through a metal detector.
Hmm.
And the guy picks it up and looks at it and goes, "Oh, is it mango?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." He threw it back in my bag and I kept walking, but I looked around thinking, "Wow, isn't this supposed to be secure?"
Yeah. It was
But
an interesting concept. I've been doing holsters for I don't know 15 years, and
damn,
they're fun. It's just they're very time consuming, and it's always been. I've only been the only person. I'm a one man show. For people who don't know, that's just I'm the only one who does all of it. But the Scorpion King thing, when I went to a training in it's not San Diego. It's actually called Boulevard, California. It's damn near Mexico. But
yeah,
I picked up a couple of those Ollipops at a gas station, and for my kids, I always get them something when I go to trainings.
yeah.
And I was holding it in my hand, and I was like, this would be a little kind of a neat little stabby device, and a lot of trial and error and doing stuff. And I always tell people when you're making something for the first, I still have one of the first holsters I ever made. I kept it, and you look at it and you go, good God, like this
Oh
is
yeah,
terrible.
oh yeah.
So I tell people you're going to have to make maybe 2, 4, 6, maybe 100 or something before it gets perfect. But I finally was happy with the way it looked, and I started just kind of asking people if they wanted to play with it, and then after that, it kind of just took off. And every drop I've done, we sell out within the one I did the other day. It was 15 minutes, and we were done. So,
Dude, I'm telling you that, and it's because it just works and it's cool.
mhm.
There's some factors to carrying gear. Like, one is it practical, and then two, is it cool? Because if it's not cool, it doesn't matter how practical it is.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? But I think at the end of the day, dude, I would love to collab with you one of these days. We'll talk off camera
yeah, that'd be
about
fun.
that, just because it's such a great tool. Like, honestly,
Yeah,
it
we
goes
did
with me
a
everywhere.
yeah we did a drop with goon tape. That was the biggest order I ever did, and they wanted purple. There's a drop coming with hobo, which will be pretty sweet. I'm gonna leave it up to him to announce that, but it's gonna be pretty cool
I'll,
looking.
I'm already hyped because I love him too.
Yeah, he's gonna do a sack with the Scorpion King, and um, yeah, And then the name, everyone kind of like, what does that mean? I honestly was trying so hard to think of a name, and there's so many like just I don't know. But there's obviously the movie The Scorpion King,
Yes, that movie
but
fucked so hard.
what I really kind of there's a movie called Nope,
Yes.
which is one of my favorite. I'm a big alien movie guy, but that was probably one of my favorites. But
Me
there's this
too.
really random part. He's wearing this sweatshirt from The Scorpion King, and there was a bunch of symbolism within that movie. Either way, that was the name I settled on, and so it just kind of stuck. But
That's awesome.
yeah, I didn't want to. I was trying too hard to think of something to do, and they all just kind of sounded the same. So
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because like I name some of my pieces. Like you'll notice if you look through my page, there's some of them that go up and it's just custom spots or whatever, but then there's like the named pieces that go up. And a lot of that is that I'm a pop culture hound.
mhm.
And so when you're like the Scorpion King, I was like, that's my boy The Rock right there.
Yeah,
You know what but
every drop we're gonna do will have a theme. So we had Breaking Bad Blue. The next one, not to spoil it, we're gonna do Pretty in Pink, so it's gonna be pink, and it's gonna kind of
oh
have some.
shit.
And then each one comes with a stick. Modelo was a really popular one. I really liked the way that came out. And then which one did I send you? Did you
I've
get
got the Modelo here. I'm
Modelo? Yeah,
actually gonna walk inside. My dogs are gonna scream because they're
that's okay.
bad little dogs.
The
But
the creamsicle ones were fun. I want to bring those back. It was the
dude,
orange.
so actually funny that you mentioned that. Literally on my fridge
Oh, cool. That's nice to
is,
hear.
is is the Modelo logo. And so I think that it's really interesting how you were able to come up with something that's just so cool and functional. And I mean, dude, it's kind of the same thing. I think you and I are kind of in the same club. You ever try to sit down and explain to somebody what you do?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to most people.
I'm like, they're like,
Yeah,
oh, so you make jewelry, and I'm like, kind of,
kind of. Yeah,
and so for you, they're like, so you make like lollipops and holsters, and you're like, let's not get too deep,
yeah.
because people get confused as fuck. I'm like, yeah, I make necklaces, but they do a lot of different things, and and people
Yeah,
are like,
it's one of those things you got to hold in the hand to really kind of understand it. And I think a lot of
dude,
people initially thought that it was actually candy, and I had to tell them, no, this is not candy. They thought it
please
was
do not put this in
candy.
your mouth.
Well, they thought it was candy on G10. I said, no, 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 it's epoxy. And so I sent some out. I actually sent a couple to Ed and Eddie, and they started playing with them. And there was a class in Upland for a weaponology course 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
And so I know that there were a couple of guys who were using them there, and it was pretty cool to see. So they had the pig lab at the end, and they were
dude, so I used to work for a company that made like handle material and shit, and
mhm.
somewhere I have some really crazy, which I don't know if micarta would be strong enough, but I have some really crazy old Westinghouse micarta rods
Oh, cool.
that I need to send your way for you to do a limited run on. But I know that we've got a little bit of time left, I guess. And so I know you asked where people can order from. It's Llorona Customs on Instagram. Or, you can just type in the Crimson Ghost. I'll come up. Um, if there's anybody that has questions or anything, you can come talk to me in person in
Hmm.
4 days. I'll be at the
Yeah,
Angler booth.
Blade will be fun.
Um, or you can call my shop phone number, which I'll go ahead and put here.
Sure, go ahead.
682-999-6391. Anybody that has questions, we lifetime warranty our stuff. Actually, this morning, when right before we hopped on, I was finishing up some repairs. You were talking about some of the first stuff that you ever got. I'm so happy when people are like, "Oh, hey, one of your first necklaces that you ever made is broken. I need to be repaired." I'm like, "Oh no, I get to fix it." You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
please send that back to me. And so, if you have broken stuff or whatever, send it back to me. I'm also going to be giving free esposas out to every person that mentions this podcast. So if somebody
Oh,
comes up
cool.
to me and says, "Hey, I heard about you on the Zen podcast, at Blade Show," I will give you a free pair of our esposas bracelets with Mac.
That's awesome.
You were supposed to have yours
I
well
think
ahead
it's
of
in the
time.
mail. I think it's in the mail now.
Yeah, and so and so I mean, hopefully when it gets there,
Yeah, I'll
you'll be
post it. I'll
able
show
to
everybody. I'm excited.
you tell me what you think. But yeah, so come see me at Blade. Mention that you listen to the podcast, and I'll give you a free pair of esposas. I'm going to probably bring about 40 of them.
Cool.
I'm
That's
going to sit
awesome.
there and make them all night tonight and tomorrow. But Mac, dude, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man, this was fun. We'll definitely talk about collaboration in the future. That'd be awesome. And thanks
Dude,
for
yeah.
being on the show. And again, if anyone wants to reach out to you, go ahead and give us your social one more time just so they can
Yep.
hear it again.
Social is Llorona Customs on IG, or you can always hit up the shop phone number. It's 682-999-6391. Shop hours are 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., although sometimes if you call it like 3 or 4 in the morning, I might be up and answer. You never
Awesome.
know.
Cool, man. Well, thank you again, and best of luck at Blade, and hopefully some people give you a shout out when you're there.
Dude, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
All right, man. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
All right, bye.
Bye.